Get a little front view of it quick. We good to go. Good. Keep going. There's the culprit. We got a wheel locked up on the front.
Oh.
That's what's dragging it.
How far do you want me to go?
Do you care about the yard too much?
Yeah.
It's leaving a mark. Okay. Yeah, we'll just do that. We'll just leave it right here.
Okay, let me back up.
Okay. Keep coming. Good. All right. Yep, you're good. Yep. This is the third night in a row this week that I've gotten back past 1 a.m. picking up a Jeep. That's getting ridiculous. But she made it home safe, and I think it's gonna be a cool project. First look at the Jeep inside the shop, and I gotta say, she does look beautiful on the outside, that is for sure. The previous owner told me that he restored this Jeep in about 1989, 1990. The restoration on the outside is definitely held up. They did a pretty good job with this thing. As always, I talk about in my videos, you always want to look for the seam on the side of the body, which is still here, as well as the drain hole on that side. Since that wheel was locked up, we had to pull the Jeep backwards on the trailer. We couldn't get it turned around. Had to pop the passenger seat out to haul it down the road because they like to flip forward if the Jeep is backwards. But on the inside of the Jeep, just take a look at it. It's in pretty good shape. The floors have definitely been replaced at one point. They're not the original sheet metal. But I gotta say that underneath here, it all looks pretty decent. It's not a perfect restoration by any means, but it's a pretty good one. Now the fun part is under the hood. This Jeep has sat for about 4 years, I'm told, which is definitely believable. But I think it's been neglected a little bit longer than that, I would say. The first thing I did when I got in the shop is I put a battery on it, turned the key switch, made sure the engine fired over, squirt the inside of the carburetor starting fluid, tried to get to fire, wouldn't fire, pulled the plugs out, put new ones in, just wasn't getting sparked, so we came over here to the distributor, popped it open, filed the points a little bit, closed it, and it fired on starting fluid. Since this is an older restoration, all these parts are old, and the fact that it's been sitting in the barn just does not help things out mechanically. I cannot stress this enough. Letting your vehicle sit is not a very good thing because you end up, even though the outside is nice and pretty, mechanically things start to fail. The first thing I noticed when I turned it over a few times is that if you look underneath the Jeep, we have water. That's not good at all. Basically what I found is that the water pump is puking all over the front of the engine. Of course, I already got a new one sitting on the shelf waiting for the gray paint to dry to match the engine. This is a fuel pump that was in the Jeep. The inside looks really nice, which is good. No rust or anything like that. From the outside, obviously, she's pretty crusty. But this thing does not seem to be pulling fuel from the tank. It might work a little bit, but it just seems really weak. Go ahead and pump this for you. You ever seen gasoline that looks like that? I sure haven't. The stuff is yellow. It's disgusting. I can't even explain the rank smell this thing is putting out. I'm going to place the fuel pump and the fuel filter. I've got the setup on my Jeep. This was brand new just a few months ago. Then I went to the fuel injection. So we're going to slap this on the Jeep. Then as I took the fuel lines off the pump, what I noticed is the rubber lines that they got right here, hard as a rock. I bet if you took this Yeah, it's starting to crack. It's just, this stuff is not good. So you could probably get away with this stuff in a pinch, just running the Jeep around. But I wouldn't want it to crack when you put the hose clamp back on. So we're going to place the rubber fuel line, which gives me an excuse to drain out this fuel tank, because I'm sure it's disgusting as well. More things on the engine bay that I've noticed. Number one, they've got this throttle return spring on the intake manifold looking a little ghetto. So I'm going to put the original bracket that comes out the back of the carburetor and then the spring to the throttle linkage. Make that look nice. The fan belt is super loose, which is not a good thing because you don't want to slip and the fan stop spinning, because if this isn't spinning, your water pump isn't spinning, engine could overheat. Now I notice when I'm looking at that setup is this is definitely not an original generator bracket on the thing. It looks like someone's welded maybe a factory piece onto another one, and it's actually hitting the battery tray down here. Not good at all. I think I've got one of these sitting out back. I'm going to pop one of those on the Jeep, fix that little situation. It's going to need an oil change, you know, just stuff like that, just general maintenance. Make sure that the charging system actually works on it. I know the headlights aren't working right now, but mechanically, that's what we got to do. Now we've got to address the one wheel that's locking up, but I came over here. Brake pedal goes straight to the floor, so the brakes aren't working either. Again, it's just a problem. If you park a vehicle when it's running, driving, stopping, it sits for years, you can't expect it to do the same thing when you pull it back out, which is why I didn't give too much money for the Jeep. I definitely paid a little bit more than I wish I did, especially seeing the things that I see now. I gotta say, the CJ2A cleaned up excellent. Really happy with how the body turned out. Raise up with forklift, pop the wheels off of it, and we're gonna check out the brake situation because this has 0 brakes. Here's a pet peeve I have. When people put on these spindle nuts, sometimes they don't have the right socket, and what they choose to do is use a hammer and a pick, and they just hammer that thing all the way around rather than using a proper socket with all the points on it to make it nice. So what you end up with is a nut that is so gouged up that the socket won't even slide over the top of it anymore, and it's really hard to get these out. Now once you do, you can sand these edges back down and make it to where the socket slides back over. We've got all the hubs off the Jeep, that way we can just completely go through the brakes, because again, this thing was restored decades ago and everything is just old and not great. Like this brake line right here is super stiff and starting to crack, not good at all. And of course, the reason why this wheel was locked up on the Jeep is because this brake shoe is caught on the outer drum, and you can see right here where it's actually become unglued off the shoe, this pad material, because it just can't sustain that. And yeah, that's why when you go in to do brakes on old Jeeps, you just want to replace all of this stuff. Even though the shoes have some pretty good depth to them, that glue is just old. It's been hot so many times, just go through everything. For the wheel hubs, I repacked the wheel bearings, both the outside one and the inside, with a new oil seal on each end. For the axle itself, we got new brake shoes on here with wheel cylinder and brake springs. Now, I repacked the steering joints with grease, and then we're going to fill the knuckles up with oil. For the rear axle, it's the same exact thing, all new replacement parts. I've got the brake lines cut. We need to make some new lines next. On the initial test run of this engine, it would come up to temperature and then just keep spiking right past it. So that tells me that the thermostat was sticking inside the housing. So of course I purchased a new one and a thermostat retainer, got all that inside the housing. But as you see, the antifreeze, this one's pretty gross yellow. This bucket that's already been filled is black, so that tells me the engine is pretty filthy on the inside. And when I put my finger in here, scooped it out, pure black. So what I'm going to do is get all the antifreeze out of the radiator and the engine. Then I'm going to take a garden hose to everything and just wash all that old dirt out. Radiator hoses are on the Jeep. We've got the new thermostat and thermostat retainer on the head. Lower hose on the Jeep. The red CJ2A is finally finished. Unfortunately, I didn't take much video of the process of fixing it out because I just didn't have time. Then after we got it to run, drive, and stop, we noticed that the Jeep had some oil leaks, and they really didn't show their faces until we ran it around for a while. A major oil leak that we had was underneath the Jeep on the transfer case where the drive shaft comes out of the back side. There's an oil seal that the yoke spins around on, and after driving it a few times, that thing just started puking oil. I mean, it coated the entire floor of the shop, so I had to pull the drive shaft off and the e-brake drum to get to that seal. We did that last night. And then up here we also fixed last night. I don't know if you can quite see it. There are seals on the knuckle on the back side, and most people never fill up their knuckles with oil so they wouldn't know it's leaking in the first place. But each side of the knuckles were leaking on the floor, so we basically had 3 major oil leaks on the Jeep, and we got that all fixed up. Then of course you got to do a little bit of aesthetics, so we added the weather stripping for the bottom of the windshield. The previous owner had a pool noodle across it, a little bit of wiring on the amp meter. Not that you can see it from the outside, but the previous owner had the wires backwards. So when it was charging, it was showing discharge, and discharge is showing charging. We also added the original grill welt. That way it keeps the grill and the hood from rubbing the paint off each other, and it looks really nice as well. The Jeep was driven so little after its initial restoration that it still got the knobs on the tires. Can't believe it. But I will say, this should be a lesson to everyone watching. If you're looking for a Jeep, you kind of got to remember, even if it's shiny on the outside, if it's sat for a number of years, you're going to do the same amount of work as the guy that's got one that sat out in the tree line for 30 years. All the rubber components are going to be bad: radiator hoses, fuel lines, brake lines, that kind of stuff. Oil seals like I did on this. If you're looking at one that's this shiny, you want to get one that's been regularly used or a more recent restoration. The older restoration that's been sitting is a little bit of a trick. We had to put a lot of work in this Jeep. I'll tell you what, we did not mess with the carburetor at all. We just had new fuel lines, and I gotta say, the thing is working excellent. Runs really, really nice. And I gotta say, it's a smooth driver. It really reminds me of my blue Jeep. Turns nice, shifts nice. And there we have it.